And I would say too, tear down the walls. Like all of this, the reason there's stigma around needing help is because we've let that be the conversation up until right now. If you need help, you're weak. And I'm going to tell you, it's the furthest thing from the truth because we all need help. So if we can shut down that stigma and crush that conversation and replace it with, hey, how can I help you? What can I do to help? Or if you need help, hey, can you help me? Have the comfort level to just ask, like, I'm in a spot. Can you help me? The more we can do to tear down those walls and create space where we're there for one another, the better we're all going to be. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Grit Meets Growth podcast, where we bring you inspiration and insights focused on getting uncomfortable, making things happen, and creating a magnetic life. If you enjoy the messages you're hearing here, please leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of the podcast. With that, let's get after it.
Yeah, did you celebrate your mom?
I did celebrate my mom. I celebrated multiple moms yesterday.
Nice.
Yeah, it was good. How about you?
We did. Lots to be thankful for there.
Yeah. That's a tough job. I think that's what hit me this year is not only having made life tough for my own mom when I was growing up, but now having kids that are a little bit older and looking around and seeing what moms do for kids and experiencing it more from the parent side. That's a tough job. And to your point, a lot to be grateful for. So
yeah, well, when your kids are little, you have little problems, right? As they get older, the problems kind of grow exponentially. And moms carry a lot of that load. And like I said, a lot to be thankful for, in my own upbringing and even where my relationship is today with my mom. Just thankful for that.
I did a little reflection on that over the last couple of days. It's interesting. There's a lot that goes into being a mom, and it goes way beyond having a baby. Like, so I'm adopted. So my mom didn't have the baby, so to speak. But she dealt with all the stuff that goes with raising a kid. Like, I know exactly who my mom is, because of who raised me and who put the time and the energy in and who walked through the storms with me when nobody else wanted to. I mean, she's a tough cookie. So yeah.
How many moms, do you think lose their identity through raising kids, right? I mean, we're talking about, May being Mental Health Awareness Month, and last episode we talked, about the topic, and I think we should, I kind of want to round it out here again, with this episode. But do you think moms lose their identity a little bit when they have children? And does that identity shift? I don't know. Not being a mother, I can only take it from a father's perspective, but I got to think that they struggle and have some of those same challenges, if not more than what we do as fathers.
I would anticipate they absolutely do. I think when you bring on a small creature that you've carried with you, and now you're going to give birth to, and now you're going to raise up, I think your identity has to shift. I mean, like you said, we've felt it as dads to an extent, but I'm sure as a mom, the intensity is maybe ramped up a little bit more. Maybe two dudes shouldn't be talking about this. Maybe we're way out of bounds and don't know what the heck we're talking about, but I think it's probably pretty accurate.
Well, I think we are way out of bounds in talking about it. I mean, I could talk about it from my perspective, right? And, some of the stigma that comes along with, being a man and being supposedly being tough, and, we're expected to be that way. We have expectations as men And that can be a real challenge sometimes to live up to those expectations as a father. There are times I know for me, like I'm dealing with a whole whirlwind of stuff in my head. And a lot of times you just box it up, right? You put it in a box and you shove it in the corner.
What happens when you bury it? What happens when you shove it in the corner?
Inevitably, it always comes back to the middle of the room. And then it just blows up into shit most of the time.
That's exactly it. Like you can like a little bit of a shift, but I think the identity, whether you're a man or a woman, women have the identity piece that we were talking about where they take on the identity of their kids and they lose some of their own identity. But there's where you went with this as a guy, you lose a little bit of identity too. And culture is going to tell you what your identity should be. Box it up and bury it. If you're going through, we were talking a little bit about this the other day. Any kind of mental health stuff you've got, any kind of anxiety or any kind of challenge that you're dealing with or fear for sure, box that up, bury it, don't talk about it. And to your point, you bury it. It's like a landmine. You're either going to step on it yourself, someone else is going to step on it and it's going to blow up when you least expect it because you buried it. And sometimes you forget where you stuck it. So
what do you do to change that?
I think conversations like we're having right now, I think you talk about it. And I think you find, you don't have to talk about it with everybody, but I think you find like these close circles of people that you can talk about it where you don't have to pack it down in the ground. You can like hold it out and you can say, here's where I'm at. Like, here's what I've got going on and it sucks. And I don't know if you've ever been in the middle of this or not, but at least you can listen to me. And I think that's one of the keys to it. If somebody brings you their stuff like that and they've got something they need to unpack or they need to talk about, you don't have to have the answer and you don't have to solve it for them. 99% of the time, you just need to listen and give them room to vent it. And that's going to help them. And a lot of times it's all they need is someplace to vent it. So how about you?
Yeah, I think, we need to realize that it is okay to not be okay. Like it's okay to have those thoughts. It's okay to have challenges in our life. We do have to figure out how to work through those things. And to your point, having those trusted circle of folks that you can just express it to without judgment, without them trying to solve, and sometimes just listen. Like I find that even with my own kids, right? Sometimes it's just about listening. Like they don't need us to solve any. They don't need us to solve the problem for us. They just want to express and talk through it. And sometimes just talking through it is a solve enough for us, right? Just by talking through it, we work through that problem in our own head. But sometimes we just need somebody to listen, right? So I find that with my kids a lot. Like I am the sounding board. And I'm thankful for that opportunity. And I have to fight my urge to want to interject and solve and just shut my mouth and listen.
Do you find that you end up waiting for them to come to you? Or do you go to them and say, hey, I just want to check in on you, see how you're doing?
Oh, they come to me always.
Naturally?
Always and often.
That's awesome.
I'm fortunate with that. Hasn't always been that way though, John. Right? That's just over the last few years that has really, come to fruition.
The reason I ask is I think, this doesn't even just apply to our kids, but it applies to family, friends. I think a lot of times if somebody comes to us, we'll extend that listening ear. We'll give them time. We'll make space for them to like talk about what they need to talk about. I feel like there's times where we need to go to people and we need to ask them like, hey, I just want to check in. I want to see how you're doing. You've either seen somebody who has given you some kind of hint that they've got something they need to talk about or they're going through something. or you just haven't talked to them in a while and you just want to check in. But I think we have the opportunity to be proactive and check in on people. And it takes like hardly any effort at all. But it can be a big deal.
We do. And I think that's that's something that needs to change, right? The people be perceptive of what's going on around them and with their friends and asking those questions. But I also think on the other side of it, like, we have to break down that stigma of, always having to be all right, and actually open up to people when we are struggling, right? And we got to find that inner circle, as we said earlier, but we have to be willing to open up in that conversation. I think it's got to come from both sides. There are those opportunities where we have to ask those, when you see, different behaviors, or they're not acting normal, like, hey, what's going on? Everything all right? But we also have to look at it from the other side to go, when I'm not all right, I have to seek out those opportunities to have conversation.
And I think when you bring up the word stigma, I think a lot of the stigma comes from how we were raised. Like, I don't know about you, but like, I had a dad, and my dad's gone now, so I can say this pretty freely. Like, I had a dad who didn't show a lot of emotion. He didn't talk to me about showing emotion. There was a lot of like, rub some dirt on it and keep moving on in life, because that's just what he did. And that's because that's what his dad taught him how to do. So I think we don't have a lot of examples sometimes of like what it looks like to not have the stigma in place, what it looks like to be open and vulnerable and say, hey, I'm not doing so good right now. And have those conversations, So the stigma part is real. There's not anyone who thinks the stigma is not real. And I think it applies to men and to women, but for guys specifically, the stigma is real. Like, rub some dirt on it, get over it, move on. You should be tough enough, strong enough to get through this and not have to talk about it. That's the real thing.
But I also think we're tough if we talk about it. Right? That takes strength to be able to recognize and realize what is happening, what's going on, how are we dealing with that? That takes strength. It probably takes more strength than it does to box it up and shove it in a corner and move on about our day. Like, being aware, having the conversations, understanding our own feelings, and being able to deal with them and finding ways to deal with them is strength in and of itself. Find your outlet, right? Find a way to blow that steam off that isn't going to impact anybody. That maybe it improves your own health. Certainly it's going to improve your mental health, but maybe it just improves your overall health, right? And we also know that physical health is an indicator of where our mental health is.
You brought up the other day, just from the health and well-being side of the world, the idea of a ship, and a ship needs an anchor. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So in the boating and yachting world, you can't go into harbor without a functioning anchor, because it is the only thing that, if your engines go, it's the only thing that keeps you from causing havoc in the harbor. It also keeps you off the rocks in rough weather. Like, if you seek shelter in a cove during bad weather, you put your anchor down. It keeps you from slamming into the rocks. That anchor is our hope. That's what gives us hope that we're going to survive the rough times. in the rough weather. And we're all going to face rough weather at some point. The chain that holds that anchor to the boat, that's faith. And faith connects us to hope. Without faith, there is no hope. We need both of those. So finding those opportunities where you can really dive into your faith in order to get back to that piece of hope, right? It's a challenge some days.
Faith's one of those topics that, like, on the list of like 3 topics you should never talk about is faith. But I think in this context, faith is what ties that anchor together. Like, at some point, there's got to be something more than everything you can see, because there's plenty of days where everything I can see, you watch the news, hop on social, like we've talked about. If you just looked at that, it can feel pretty hopeless. There's got to be something more to it. There's got to be something bigger at play. And I think, like, people dive into faith in a lot of different ways. And everybody who's listening to this may have a different take on faith and what that means to them. But I think we're at a point right now where if you don't have some faith and you don't figure out what faith looks like to you, you're going to coast in the ocean with no anchor, and you're going to crash on the rocks, and it's going to be painful. There's got to be something that anchors you in the middle of what we're going through right now. So, yeah.
And that comes in many forms, right? Define what that is for you. I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody what that should be. That's not my job. It's up to you to find out what that faith really is and use it to connect you back to your hope.
And a lot of times, the faith conversation opens the door to finding other people who share in that faith that you can have relationships with that will strengthen what that anchor is tied to. Like, sometimes it doesn't just have to be you that is the chain. Like, if you start to create those connections within your faith, people who are tied to the same things you are, and there's opportunities to get stronger together in that. And I think that's, like, we're all going to go through storms. We're all going to go through stuff. And you and I talked about this a little bit the other day, but it's a story that I like. And you don't have to be Christian to enjoy this story, but there's a guy who's paralyzed. He's on a mat, and he's trying to get to Jesus, but Jesus is talking in this house, and he can't get into the house because he's paralyzed, and there's a big crowd. And fortunately, this guy has 4 friends who are crazy dudes who take him up to the roof of the house, and they scratch through the roof of the house, and they make a hole in the roof that they can lower this guy down into so that he can have this conversation with Jesus. And like I said, whether you're Christian and that resonates with you or not, here's the deal. We need to have friends around us that are crazy enough to pick us up, take us up to the roof, and scratch through the roof to get us down when the seas get rough and when crises come and all the things that hit the fan. When those things start to hit the fan, we need people around us that are going to help take care of us. And sometimes we're the dude on the mat, and sometimes we're the people carrying the mat. You're going to play both roles in your life, but that's where that anchor, that faith comes in. The people you surround yourself comes in. It's just a reminder of how much we need each other right now.
Seek those people out that are going to pick you up, not drag you down. Sometimes we need to do some house cleaning, and that's okay. Right? We've talked about that before. Friends in our life will come and go. And I'm convinced that people are put in our lives when we need them most. And there will be a time you don't need them anymore. And it's okay to clean house. And surround yourself with those people that are going to raise you up, that are going to pick you up, that want you to do well, that you want to do well, that you share those values, and not the ones that are dragging you down.
I refer to those people as my 2 a.m. guys. Like, there's a list of people that I know if I needed help, I could call them at 2 a.m. And Christina's constantly like, well, what do you need to call somebody at 2 a.m. for? Like, what are you doing at 2 a.m.? And I'm like, who knows? But at 2 a.m., I might need somebody to come help me. And you have a list of people who, if I called you at 2 a.m. and said, dude, I need some help, there's not a doubt in my mind that you'd be there. We need friends like that. Not only do we need them, we want them. And we can have friends like that, and we can be friends like that. But that's a pretty important part of life, is your 2 a.m. people. Who's on your 2 a.m. list?
And I would challenge you to be that person, right? All of us out there, everybody listening, I challenge you to be that 2 a.m. person, regardless of what it is. Answer the call. Throw the anchor. Be that person. That's pretty deep, dude.
It is. It's a big deal. And I would say too, tear down the walls. Like, all of this, the reason there's stigma around needing help is because we've let that be the conversation up until right now. If you need help, you're weak. And I'm going to tell you, it's the furthest thing from the truth, because we all need help. So if we can shut down that stigma and crush that conversation and replace it with, hey, how can I help you? What can I do to help? Or if you need help, hey, can you help me? Have the comfort level to just ask, like, I'm in a spot, can you help me? The more we can do to tear down those walls and create space where we're there for one another, the better we're all going to be.
Yeah, I say let's challenge the status quo. Let's all challenge that. Be strong, but be vulnerable, right? We could still be strong and be vulnerable at the same time. That is not being weak. Dealing with challenges, dealing with struggle is not being weak, because everybody faces it, man. Right? I've always lived by this statement. It's not the situation that makes the character of the man. It's how you deal with it. Deal with it. Put it out there. Throw it out to your friends. Throw it out to your family. Talk about it. If you're having struggles, talk about it. And heal, man. Do the work. It's entirely possible to get out of that bad mental spot that you're in. If you're struggling today, talk to somebody about it. Hit me with a DM. I'll send you a message back. I'll be there to listen. But don't box it up and shove it in the corner. Take the stuff head on. You'll thank yourself in the long run. And so will your family.
They don't want to step on your landmines, man. Or have to walk around them.
Yeah, right. Isn't that what happens a lot of the times? Just dance around them.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest message for, Mental Health Month. Know that you're not alone and ask for help. Have those conversations, create space for those conversations, check in on people. We all do that. We're moving in the right direction, and we will find hope through doing that. And I think that's the one thing the world could use more of today is hope. You can look a lot of places for hope. You can be a source of it for the people around you. Do that. Yeah. Yeah. This is a hopeful conversation.
It's heavy, dude. It's heavy though, man. This conversation is really, it's weighing heavy on me today. Because I know there are people in my circle that are struggling today. Yeah.
Well, hopefully they reach out or we reach out to them.
Right on.
We do the check-in.
Absolutely.
It is heavy.
It certainly is when you put it in that context, right?
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, you know what you got to do. Be the hope for your circle, and get out there and get after it and make it a great day.
See you later, man. That wraps it up for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the Grit Meets Growth tribe. And thanks for growing along with us and being part of this journey together. If you know someone who needs to hear the conversation we had today, please share it. If you got something out of this conversation, please leave us a review. And finally, if you want to make sure you don't miss future episodes, just remember to subscribe. We're thankful for each and every one of you. And as my co-host and good friend Chris Cathers always says, make it a great day.